Unveiling the incredible truth. 7 surprising reasons civilizations fail to thrive forever. The rain drummed against the windows of Sarah Evans' classroom, a somber soundtrack to the heavy silence that hung in the air. Delving into history was supposed to be a lively affair, yet the weary faces of her students bore testament to the despair that clung to Oakwood like a thick fog. Every passion she'd poured into teaching felt siphoned away, replaced by the oppressive reality of dwindling enrollment and budget cuts that loomed over the local high school. How could she ignite their imaginations when doubt gnawed at the very foundation of their existence? She was losing them. Sarah clenched her jaw, struggling to navigate through the emotional turmoil roiling inside her. As a proud daughter of Oakwood, she felt the burden of her community's fate, weighing her down with every passing day. The town she'd cherished since childhood was withering, and she could feel the light dimming in her students' eyes. Was she, as a teacher, simply tasked with delivering knowledge, or was she responsible for keeping the flame of hope alive? While the rain pelted the glass, Sarah's thoughts turned inward, sensing the deep-rooted contradictions within herself. She had devoted her life to education, yet now faced the fear of inadequacy. Could she truly save them? A chilling thought crept into her mind. What would happen if she shared her grandfather's journal with her class? The dusty leather-bound book held his documented wisdom, notes that transcended time. But could revelations of civilizations past illuminate a path forward, or merely deepen the stark divide in such a fractured town? Before she could ponder further, a movement in the back of the room drew her attention. Daniel Malone, the town's ambitious architect, had taken a seat beside her most disengaged student, Mike. Sarah's heart quickened as Daniel turned toward her with an encouraging smile. The very embodiment of ambition. Yet, a past fraught with complexities haunted her. His family and hers had tangled in a bitter history that echoed among Oakwood's aging walls. Before we continue, she said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Her mind raced back to the journal, where she had already begun to uncover those painful truths of familial prejudice buried within Oakwood's history. The excitement of discussing such revelations with her students had ignited a flicker of hope. Yet what if this light drew attention to hardships best left undiscussed? Would it alienate her from the very community she loved? As she connected the dots between the past and their present troubles, unrest brewed among the townsfolk. A tension that turned neighbor against neighbor began to ferment in the diner, where conversations shifted from warmth to bitter rivalries. Deep down, Sarah felt every gaze turned her way like a heavy stone pressing against her chest. Now, poised at the edge of truth, she felt her own integrity waver. Would she truly dare to unveil the incredible truth she had discovered about her town and her family, potentially tearing apart not just historical myths, but the connections she had with those around her? Canceling it felt cowardly, but revealing it risked exposing the fissures that could fracture Oakwood irrevocably. The clock ticked on, and with every heartbeat, she felt time slipping through her fingers. Would her relentless pursuit of clarity, of justice, lead to salvation or ruin? As she stared into the eyes of her students, now ignited with curiosity, an electric charge passed through the room. I need to know, she whispered to herself, caught in the eye of a storm. Uncertainty loomed heavy in the air as the question curled inside her. Was it worth it, rewarding knowledge at the cost of community? The day felt like the stillness before a tempest, and Sarah took a breath, knowing she was far from any resolution. The real battle for Oakwood's soul had only just begun. Each passing moment felt charged with urgency as Sarah's gaze swept over the classroom. Her students had transformed since that rainy day, their resolve unexpectedly strengthened. They hung on her words, eyes gleaming with curiosity, eager for the revelations she hesitated to deliver. She sensed a flicker of solidarity, a spark that had been dormant but was now rekindling. pushing aside the encroaching shadows of despair. Could she believe that these young minds stood ready to confront the complexities of their shared history? Despite the intoxicating thrill of their renewed interest, Sarah felt a tempest brewing within her. The journal, with its delicate pages wrapped in hidden stories, beckoned her. The decision loomed larger than just a teaching moment. It was a threshold that could alter the course of Oakwood's future. Would she risk the fallout to help her students step into their power? In the days that followed, Sarah remained restless. She canceled her weekend plans, poring over the journal, rereading her grandfather's musings, which wove together themes of ambition, conflict, and consequences. Each line felt increasingly relevant as she juxtaposed her grandfather's insights with the current unrest in Oakwood. The dense cloud of fear that had enveloped the town was getting thicker, and the clock ticking reverberated in her thoughts like a relentless metronome. Determined to do more than just survive, she devised a plan to approach her students with sensitivity and empathy. They would delve deeper into history, not to shame but to empower. Sarah prepared a series of lessons that examined not only the failures of ancient civilizations but the resilience that often sprang from adversity. Perhaps, she pondered, by exploring the hardest truths, we can forge a way toward understanding. When Monday arrived, a thick anticipation filled the air. Sarah stood before her class, her heart racing. Today, she began, we're going to explore the hidden narratives that shape our perceptions not just of history, but of ourselves in this town. She felt the tension crackle as students leaned in, hungry to uncover more. As she introduced the crucial questions they'd explore together, a hand shot up. It was Daniel. Why do you think people are so afraid to talk about their past? Isn't it better to know the truth, even if it's uncomfortable? His voice held a confident edge, yet underneath lingered a hint of vulnerability. Her response came slowly, shaped by the weight of her own discovery. Sometimes, facing the truth can break you, but it can also be the very thing that binds you, that allows you to heal. The resonance of her words sank in, not just among her students but within herself as well. Over the next few weeks, they journeyed through history, questioning, reflecting, and slowly unveiling layers of their own community's story. But as momentum built, so did whispers in the hallways, murmurs about content that stirred unrest, questions about loyalty, and allegations of betrayal. Sarah realized that each successful lesson stirred more than just academic curiosity. It ignited fear among parents and townsfolk who saw change as a threat. The very tumult she hoped to address bore down on her. Angela, once a spirited student, approached Sarah after class, her face twisted in uncertainty. Is it really okay to question our family's history, Mrs. Evans? What if it means uncovering things we aren't ready to face? Sarah felt the weight of her student's question echoing through her own soul. Herein lay the crux of her dilemma. Should she place the burden of exploration upon her students when she herself was still wrestling with the decision to confront her past? Tension crackled like electricity. The fear that had settled over Oakwood began to shift, and Sarah sensed the winds of change gathering ominously. Would her commitment to honesty encourage growth, or would it unravel the very fabric of trust she had cultivated in the classroom? As the classroom erupted in a debate about the ethics of revealing their history, Sarah stood at the confluence of past and future, caught between enlightenment and devastation. The end result rested on her choices and the clock marched on, unrelenting. Next time, she thought, the journey takes a turn, and I must decide how far I'm willing to go to unearth the truth. The moment of real confrontation was nearing, and with it, the possibility of irrevocable change. Would she find the strength to face whatever lay hidden in the winding roads of Oakwood's legacy? The whispers grew louder with each passing day, a murmur that seeped through the corridors of the school and into the community. Sarah could feel the tension building, and it coiled around her like a tightrope, pulling her between the expectations of parents and the desires of her students. The stakes had risen sharply, and her commitment to honesty felt like a fragile glass structure, precariously balanced on the edge of a precipice. In the following class, armed with resolve and a burgeoning sense of purpose, Sarah walked in with the journal clasped tightly in her hands. This time, however, the weight it bore felt heavier than before. The tension was palpable, and she sensed an energy that crackled through the room, and excitement tinged with fear. "Today," she announced, "we will tackle the implications of our findings." The students shifted in their seats, anticipation mixing with apprehension. "We'll reflect on the valuable lessons history holds, but we'll also confront the uncomfortable truths that lie within our own stories." Daniel's hand shot up again, as if he were her most eager lieutenant. "Why is it so hard for people to embrace their past? Why does it feel dangerous?" His question struck deep chords within her as she struggled to articulate the complexity. "Because," she began slowly, her voice steady, "the past can be a mirror, a reflection of our most profound shame or our greatest triumphs. And sometimes, embracing that mirror forces us to face ourselves." As discussions unfolded, the class wrestled with the idea of legacy, what it means to inherit a history, both proud and shameful. Angela joined the discourse, her brow furrowed. "Mrs. Evans, are we prepared to handle what we might uncover? What if our truths fracture our community even more deeply?" Sarah paused. Angela's anxiety echoed her own uncertainties. The weight of her students' emotional safety hung over her like a storm cloud. They were hungry for knowledge, yet frightened of its implications. In that moment, the path ahead crystallized, murky yet undeniable. She would need to create a framework that could hold their discoveries, one that would encourage their courage while anchoring them in the present. Sarah designed a series of trust-building exercises. "We need to create a foundation before we venture deeper," she thought. She introduced small group discussions focused on sharing personal stories distinct from the larger context of history. This strategy was twofold. It would foster bonds among students and anchor the conversations in their lived experiences rather than abstract ideas. Days transformed into weeks, and the classroom evolved into a sacred space. Students shared tales of their roots, of triumphs and tribulations. Each narrative revealed a facet of Oakwood's history still concealed. With each story told, Sarah felt a gentle metamorphosis within herself. The more they uncovered, the more resolute she became in the face of the swirling uncertainty outside their walls. Yet, as they delved deeper, external pressures mounted. Parents began to voice their grievances, demanding an end to what they deemed dangerous discussions that stirred up trouble in the community. The local Board of Education convened, fueled by discontent and fear. With the specter of censorship looming, Sarah realized that every choice she made now carried profound consequences. The conversations that laid foundations for understanding had birthed a powerful synergy among her students, but it ran the risk of igniting volatile backlash. Could she safeguard their thirst for knowledge, or would she fall under the weight of public opinion? On the day the board meeting was scheduled, Sarah stood before her students, simmering with an emotional cocktail of determination and fear. "This is our turning point," she addressed them, her voice firm. "What we uncover could either strengthen or fracture us. But we must face this together." The echo of her words reverberated in the room, uniting them in a shared resolve. As they prepared to take their history back and reclaim the narrative, Sarah felt a distinct change within her, a transformation ignited by the courage of her students, leading her to confront the ultimate truth looming on the horizon. With the board's decision impending and the danger of backlash becoming all too real, Sarah braced herself. The time had come to face not just the past of Oakwood, but the imprinted shadows of her own history. Would she acknowledge the revelations buried within the journal, or would that knowledge remain locked away, further complicating their quest for understanding? The upcoming confrontation felt monumental, a reckoning not just for her students but for herself. The echo of Sarah's earlier words hung in the air as the class prepared for what felt like the storm before the calm. The board meeting loomed like an indomitable giant, casting a long shadow over their discoveries. She could feel the steady thrum of anxiety building inside her, matching the palpable tension that hung in the classroom. Her heart raced. Authentic scrutiny awaited her, not only from the board but from the community as a whole. Determined to arm both herself and her students with resilience, Sarah spent the night meticulously reviewing the journal's entries. Each page spilled forth tales woven from the fabric of Oakwood's history, revealing a web of intertwined lives, all marked by triumphs and failures alike. Secrets hidden behind public facades flashed in her mind, leaving a trail of unanswered questions. What stories had she buried? What unacknowledged truths lay in her own past, waiting for the right moment to emerge? With the meeting imminent, she felt driven to harness her students' courage. In the following class, with newfound resolve, she introduced an activity called the Truth Circle. Each student would take turns sharing something they had never revealed before, offering a glimpse into their lives beyond the classroom. This will not only unify us but strengthen our bond as we brave the unknown together, she told them, highlighting the importance of vulnerability in facing criticism. Daniel led the circle, his voice trembling slightly. "I think I've always been afraid of what people would think of my family's history," he disclosed. In that moment of vulnerability, Sarah realized the power her students held within themselves. They were becoming not just voices but catalysts for change, willing to dig deeper and confront the truths of their lives. As each story unfolded, Sarah felt her own burdens mingle with theirs. She listened intently, her heart warming with each revelation. The fears, dreams, and legacies shared by her students reflected her own struggles, illuminating connections that had lain dormant. It was a transformative realization. She needed to embrace her past as much as she urged her students to embrace theirs. The conversations awakened a latent confidence. The students were not only seeking the truth about their community but also unearthing their identities. Encouraged, Sarah finally decided she couldn't remain an observer on the sidelines anymore. "I need to share something with you all," Sarah said, her voice quieter but steady. She recounted a chapter from her own life that had shaped her views on legacy and fear. As she spoke, she felt both liberated and vulnerable, exposing her intimate failure to confront her childhood disappointment. It felt like ripping off a bandage. The pain was sharp but necessary. The room became a sanctuary, fostering an atmosphere of mutual respect and understanding. Yet, as she opened herself to her students, the flicker of doubt resurfaced. Would this admission serve to strengthen her connection with them, or would it expose her to vulnerabilities that could be manipulated by critics? She steeled herself against these thoughts. "Empowerment lies in vulnerability," she murmured internally, embracing the inner dialogue that wrestled with her hesitation. In sharing, could she show her students that the cracks in their stories were not blemishes but threads that made the tapestry of their lives richer? As the day of the board meeting drew near, the weight of their revelations pressed heavily on her. There would be adversaries who would challenge everything she stood for, and Sarah would need to rally her students, shield their newfound knowledge against fear, and confront the board, holding herself accountable as part of that narrative. "What we face is not just about history," she reminded her students one last time before the meeting. "It's about who we are and the strength we find when we stand together. We are history in the making." With the meeting enshrined in their minds, anticipation mingled with trepidation as they prepared to raise their voices. The thought echoed. What revelations lay beyond the confrontation? Would their courage embolden them, or would the scrutiny dissolve their spirit? The upcoming board meeting promised more than resolutions. It held the potential for upheaval, setting the stage for a clash of ideals that would challenge both her and her students in unforeseen ways. Would Sarah find the strength to wield their shared histories as a shield, or would self-doubt seep through the cracks where newfound courage was beginning to blossom? The hours slipped away as Sarah stared at the clock, each tick echoing the frantic rhythm of her heart. The board meeting was mere hours away, and despite the energy bubbling within her classroom just days prior, apprehension gnawed at her. Would the fire ignited in her students hold when faced with the vested interests of authority? Would she? As she moved towards the front of the room, papers spilled and scattered, a signal of her internal chaos. She had assembled her notes meticulously, yet they now seemed an overwhelming tangle of ideas. The passionate testimonies of her students haunted her mind, their bravery standing in stark contrast to her own flickering confidence. They had entrusted her with their truths. Now she had to do the same. "Today we have to show who we are," Sarah addressed her students. A surface smile masked her internal struggle. "We need to rally around our narratives, our truths." But as she spoke, A quiet voice inside questioned her authority. Could she be the one to lead them into the fray? Each student nodded, yet she observed traces of uncertainty clouding their faces. The burden of their stories was momentarily evident, and while she wanted desperately to lift that weight, she wrestled with the fear that her own voice would falter. Daniel, recognizing her turmoil, stepped forward. "Miss Sarah, we believe in you," he said, his words unexpected but perfectly timed. It ignited a spark within her, a reminder that she was not just leading but also learning from their courage. She inhaled deeply, tasting the tension of the moment. "I need you to remember what we've shared. Don't just focus on what the board will say. Focus on why we're here." In that instant, a thought crystallized in her mind. The meeting could become a reflective conversation, not merely a venue for judgment. She envisioned her students standing with her, each a guardian of their own narratives. Perhaps the power of shared truths could dismantle the barriers before them. As the gathering neared, the school's hallways buzzed with anticipation. Sarah and her class walked towards the boardroom, the air thick with uncertainty. Each tentative footstep mirrored her internal conflict, undulating between hope and dread. She positioned herself at the front, surrounded by her students, the collective energy of fragile armor against the looming disapproval. The board members, a stoic group entrenched in tradition, regarded them with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. It was in these moments that Sarah recognized a crucial juncture. She had to assert herself, not just as an educator, but as one who embodied the lessons she advised her students to take to heart. With every word she spoke, she drew upon the essence of their shared truths, allowing the stories of her students to resonate and forge connections in the room. The hesitation unfurled as she felt their courage flow through her, shaping her stance. Her voice firm yet vulnerable. She challenged the board to see the humanity behind the statistics, to acknowledge their collective authenticity rather than dismiss it as mere educational fluff. "How can we discuss the future of Oakwood without understanding its past?" she pressed. The murmurs around the table indicated a desire to retreat into familiar arguments, but Sarah felt emboldened. She could feel the threads of history weaving between her words, powerful enough to reframe the discussion. Time pressed forward like a drumbeat in her chest, each second a heartbeat echoing the stakes at hand. This was her moment, a culmination of all she had faced. Her students leaned in closer, their trust giving her strength, igniting her resolve. The board chair, unimpressed, leaned back, his lack of engagement a challenge writ large. How could she reach him? She wondered. Suddenly, clarity struck. She needed to connect the dots between their stories and his. What if their experiences revealed systemic failures within the district? Just then, she seized her moment. If we fail to acknowledge the richness of our community's history, we do so at our own peril. I urge you to see us not as statistics or test scores, but as the narrative of Oakwood that deserves to flourish. As she spoke, she noticed some board members exchanging glances. For the first time, she sensed a shift. Would this meeting become a turning point, or a retreat back into indifference? With adrenaline coursing through her veins, she knew the conversation was far from over. The intensity of the moment pressed upon her. If they could turn the tide today, they could reframe their future. Could she rally them once more? Or would this victory hold within it an unexpected consequence? The question loomed as uncertainty melded with hope. Was this merely the beginning of a profound revelation, or a step towards a confrontation she couldn't yet foresee? The seconds stretched like elastic, each tick of the clock a reminder of the weight pressing down on Sarah. Her voice, however firm, felt like a tightrope straining under the need for balance. The board chair's silent skepticism hung palpably in the air, a barrier she had yet to breach. Would her words resonate, or merely ricochet off the walls of institutional indifference? Sarah could feel her students shifting behind her, their silent solidarity a cushion against her anxiety. It was a moment charged with the energy of their vulnerabilities, fueled by stories that demanded to be heard. Yet, amid this support, a deeper battle unfolded within her. Would they find a way to harness that collective narrative, or would her fear of failure turn it into a distant echo? "Look at what we have accomplished together," she implored, looking directly at the board members. These students are not just names on a roster. They are voices that tell the complete story of our community, a tapestry woven with both triumphs and struggles. As she fought to articulate the essence of their shared experiences, she wrestled with a nagging thought: could she articulate the urgency of their cause clearly enough to cut through the apathy? The board's disinterest could easily snuff out the fire kindled in the classroom. Sarah turned her focus back to her students, searching for their energy to reinvigorate her own. They were her source of strength, their hope reflected in wide eyes that hung on her every word. In that moment, she realized her mission transcended the mere presentation of facts. It was a passionate plea for recognition of the lived experiences behind those facts. The board's glances shifted as her words took shape, sparking unexpected reactions. Snippets of doubt crossed their faces. She'd seen those expressions before. The beginnings of a challenge, perhaps. She pressed on. Our school deserves funding that acknowledges our unique challenges. Real equity demands understanding. Let us show you who we truly are. As she dissected the layers of their stories, the board members began to shift in their seats an acknowledgement, a sense of discomfort. Did they see her students or merely hear their own doubts echoed back to them? The board chair finally leaned forward, an eyebrow raised, the first sign of engagement she had witnessed. You talk about equity, but how do you propose to measure success? You are asking for something quite profound. His tone remained skeptical but edged with curiosity, a crack in the veneer of authority. In that moment, something clicked within Sarah. This was not merely a plea for support. It was an opportunity for conversation. Success isn't solely defined by grades or standardized tests. She responded, her heart pounding as she dared to shift the paradigm. It is found in progress, in emotional growth, and in community connection. I urge each of you to consider, how do we quantify the resilience and creativity that these students possess? With her voice unwavering, Sarah began to outline a framework for presenting the emotional and social learning standards evident in her classroom. Each point she made was infused with anecdotes from her students' tiny victories amid struggles that told of profound transformations. In her reflection, she gathered momentum, seeing eyes begin to flicker with understanding a profound reality that their rigid metrics could not capture. It became increasingly clear to her that she was not just advocating for her students, but also unveiling a larger truth about the limits of conventional measures of success. A spark connected the room. Questions emerged from the board, curiosity interlaced with caution. Sarah marveled at their gradual evolution from spectators to participants in the dialogue. In her heart, hope began to take root, yet with it rose a new type of apprehension. She had unlocked a door, but were they ready to walk through it? As she wrapped up the conversation, adrenaline surged within her. The challenge was shifting. The stakes were higher now, moving from a conversation of need into one of potential change. Just as the board chair began to respond, a new voice interrupted an unfamiliar, sharp question slicing through the camaraderie that had begun to bloom. But what happens if we don't agree with your perspective? Sarah's breath caught momentarily. The encounter promised further confrontation, and the board's tone had subtly shifted again. The moment of truth had arrived. She could either retreat or forge ahead into the discomfort of the unknown, ready to defend not just her students' stories, but her own burgeoning confidence. What would her answer reveal about her path moving forward, and what unexpected consequences lay ahead? The question hung in the air like a thick fog, its sharpness unsettling. Sarah's heart raced, an internal battle brewing as she weighed her response. She had experienced dissent before, disagreement from colleagues, community pushback, but this was different. The board's collective authority felt less like a shield and more like an impenetrable wall. Her mind raced as she considered the ramifications of her answer. Retreating would mean failing not just her students, but herself. To stand her ground, could she do that without alienating those who held the reins of power? They needed to recognize her passion as legitimate. They had to see beyond their rigid definitions of success. Disagreement is a natural part of growth, she replied, forcing steadiness into her voice. What I ask is that we use this moment as a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. If we disagree, Let us dig deeper into those perspectives, ask uncomfortable questions, and strive for clarity. The goal isn't to impose my view. It's to invite dialogue that leads to understanding. The board chair tilted his head, interested yet skeptical, but she sensed some shifting and openness blooming around the edges of rigid authority. She pressed on, enthused by the flickering of, perhaps, shared interest. What if this disagreement holds the key to deeper insights into not just our school but into how we define educational success as a whole? Sarah's gaze roamed the faces before her, searching for the flicker of engagement. The silence that followed felt like an eternity, full of doubts and newfound resolve. If they were willing to grapple with dissent, perhaps they truly were on the brink of an important discussion. Yet, uncertainty lingered. Was she truly prepared to stand firm amid opposition? The board chair finally broke the stillness, his brow furrowed. You present a compelling case for emotional growth, but how do we ensure that this vision translates into action? Words alone won't secure funding. His challenge was more than a call to action. It was a gauntlet thrown down at her feet. The pressure mounted, but beneath it bloomed an undeniable thrill. This was the moment she had longed for, the chance to illustrate her vision with tangible frameworks and necessary metrics that aligned with her heartfelt narrative. Feeling an unexpected surge of confidence, Sarah dove into details about curriculum adjustments, specific practices, and community partnerships that could illuminate their path forward. I propose we develop a pilot program focused on social-emotional learning. This program would incorporate student input to gauge impact on individual development, making each voice a vital component of success metrics, she suggested, enthusiasm edging her words. As she spoke, she registered her own words taking flight, buoyed by newfound clarity. Amid her growing excitement, worry flickered momentarily. What if those plans became an academic exercise without true commitment? The board members exchanged glances, pondering her proposal, trying to grasp its implications. Outside, the sun danced through the windows, casting warm patches of light, drawing focus back to the potential awaiting not only her students but the institution itself. Then came the unexpected. The board chair's voice softened further, an unmistakable shift. And if this pilot fails? What's your plan then? A ripple of concern washed over her. Failure loomed like a shadow, a reminder of the whispers of her own self-doubt. Yet, paradoxically, it pushed her deeper into self-examination. What success truly meant to her had always been tied to the journey, not just the destination. I believe that every failure can yield a wealth of insights, she responded, steadied by her commitment to illuminate the raw truths of their educational landscape. This is about learning and growth. If we see setbacks simply as losses, we risk missing opportunities to evolve. Her heart raced but steadied at the mention of setbacks as pivotal moments. Could she capture their imagination, inspire them to embrace the flaws inherent in the learning process? The board members needed to understand that this was not just about successful outcomes. It was about crafting a resilient environment for both students and educators. Let us not fear disagreement, she concluded, her resolve crystallizing. It makes us stronger, can spark creativity and drive transformation. If we all engage in this process earnestly, we'll find common ground even in the most diverse perspectives. Suddenly, the room shifted. Their guarded expressions softened into contemplation. Hope thrummed through her veins. What if this marked not just a moment of connection but the beginning of a deeper transformation? But in the back of her mind, a nagging voice whispered. What lay ahead if she ignited the flame of curiosity but could not sustain its fire against the pressures of a potentially hostile administration? Just as she made peace with the shifting dynamics, another voice interrupted. The board member, with skepticism in his eyes, leaned in, ready to throw another question into the fray. Where do you see yourself fitting into this if we initiate the changes you propose? Sarah felt her breath catch. Would this conflict define her path, or would it be the catalyst for her evolution? This moment could become the cornerstone of her career or the pitfall of her ambitions. She prepared for the clash, exhilarated and fearful of what it could unravel. The question hung there, almost palpable, invoking turbulence in the air. Sarah felt the weight of those words pressing against her chest, each syllable laden with implications. What did he mean by fitting in? Was this a challenge to her authority or an invitation to dive deeper into her own professional narrative? She swallowed hard, forcing her thoughts to sharpen. Her response had to resonate, not just with the board members, but within her own quest for growth. I see myself not just as an implementer of changes, but as a catalyst for dialogue and reflection, she began, consciously taking a breath to steady herself. In initiating this cycle of transformation, I want to lead by example, demonstrating vulnerability while engaging in conversations that matter. Her voice softened as she navigated the labyrinth of her own thoughts. Education isn't a one-way street. My role must evolve. I'm here to create an environment where every voice counts, including my own. By embodying this philosophy, I will encourage both faculty and students to engage authentically with their journeys. She sensed the board's collective attention flickering, as curiosity ignited the previously guarded expressions. Sarah leaned into that momentum, ready to weave together her vision with pragmatic realities. Implementing change isn't a solo venture. It requires teamwork, transparency, and ongoing reflection. I would work alongside educators, families, and students, cultivating a culture where feedback is embraced and utilized. The board chair nodded, prompting a flicker of hope to spark within her. Yet, beneath the surface lingered an undercurrent of tension. She was inviting scrutiny with every assertion, every vulnerable confession of her leadership intentions. Would they rally behind her proposal, or would her ideas be dismissed as naive dreams disconnected from the hard truths of resource limitations? What specific actions do you plan to take to foster this culture? The skeptical board member pressed, his eyes narrowing. Not the most welcoming question, but Sarah welcomed it nonetheless. Clarity began to take shape in her mind. I propose regular workshops where teachers and students can openly exchange thoughts on curriculum effectiveness, dissect feedback without fear of repercussions, and become co-creators of our academic environment. Additionally, I intend to develop a mentorship program connecting experienced educators with those feeling overwhelmed by the change. As she articulated her plans, a sense of empowerment surged through her. Sarah was assembling not just an outline of practical steps but a transformative vision that could redefine success within their educational framework. But just as resolve surged, uncertainty twisted within her. Would her transparency about the challenges she faced in such a radical shift deter them? Could she bear the scrutiny that came with authentic leadership? The looming fear of backlash from those who might reject her ideals clawed at her optimism. Yet in that moment of tension, clarity became her anchor. Fostering a genuine connection, alongside balancing vulnerability with leadership, would define her career. Acknowledging our collective responsibility is key, she added, voice steadier, bolstered by her resolve. If we can create a safe space for everyone involved to voice concerns and celebrate victories, we'll decrease resistance and nurture trust. Isn't that the ultimate goal to build a resilient, responsive educational ecosystem? The subsequent silence felt pregnant with possibilities, the tension in the room palpable as she watched their expressions shift toward contemplation. Was she successfully reframing their perceptions, guiding them toward a reflection of their values that extended beyond rigid definitions of success? But then, that nagging voice returned, echoing the doubts that still clung like shadows. What if they saw her approach as merely an idealistic avenue? What if her willingness to embrace vulnerability was perceived as weakness? Very compelling points, Sarah, the board chair, finally said, breaking the silence. But she couldn't shake the unease growing within her as he added, but where is accountability in this vision? How will we ensure these changes are implemented effectively and not just lofty notions? The challenge sparked a renewed determination in Sarah. What would accountability look like in her vision? The tension solidified around her, each board member's gaze keen and expectant. She felt the exhilarating yet fearsome melding of ambition and trepidation, pushing her to analyze what she was truly prepared to stake. Could her ideals withstand the scrutiny and pressure to prove tangible results? What measures could she implement to hold both herself accountable and cultivate an environment of responsibility? As she composed herself to respond, the weight of those truths settled in her mind. What transformation awaited her if she could reconcile these realities with her passionate vision? The moment felt like a turning point. Would she emerge from this meeting fortified and evolved, or would the shadows of doubt consume her? With everything on the line, Sarah resolved to dive deeper into the heart of this challenge, ready to dissect her ideals further, with the hope of transforming them into something actual. The air buzzed with tension, time stretching in that powerful pause. Somewhere amid that crucible of conflict, the answer lingered, but could she articulate her path clearly enough before it slipped away? As the finality of the board chair's voice faded into the thick silence, Sarah's heart raced with a blend of anxiety and a new spark of courage. The challenge hung above her like a storm cloud, obscuring her vision but daring her to find clarity. Accountability. Perhaps therein lay the key to bridging her dreams with the harsh realities of the institutional world she inhabited. She took a measured breath, employing every piece of training she had absorbed in various leadership workshops over the years. This was a defining moment, not merely about securing approval. It was about redefining her essence as a leader. Accountability must be actionable, not just a concept we rehash in our meetings. She began, words spilling out with newfound conviction. I propose we initiate a bi-monthly review process, where we transparently track the progress of our initiatives against defined benchmarks. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but Sarah pressed on, her mind racing with possibilities. Success metrics will not be limited to numerical data. We should also quantify qualitative feedback through surveys and roundtable discussions. This way, we can gauge not only academic outcomes but also the emotional and psychological climate within our institution. Accountability, then, becomes a living framework rather than a stagnant checklist. She watched closely as the expressions in the room began to soften. Skepticism still simmered beneath the surface, but curiosity flickered in their eyes. This could turn into an insightful dialogue rather than a mere battle she had to win. Moreover, she continued, wanting to expand her newly formed vision into a corporate structure. Mentorship programs will require defined goals, with designated feedback loops between mentors and ments to ensure growth. She realized the gravity of her assertions as they unfolded, each idea seeded with vulnerability but targeted with purpose. Sarah's pulse quickened at the realization that she had inadvertently intertwined her pursuit of accountability with her own professional growth. This was her opportunity to not only encourage others but also hold herself to higher standards. Could this approach become indicative of her leadership style, a beacon guiding her toward authenticity and decisive action? Suddenly, an unforeseen fear gripped her. What if she overstepped? What if the rigorous accountability metrics she envisioned felt suffocating to the very educators she sought to empower? Were her aspirations reshaping the framework, or were they binding it under a relentless system? I intend to keep these discussions fluid. If something isn't working, we pivot, she added, this time cautiously, hoping to ease any tension her enthusiasm might have inspired. As she made her their ground with principles of agility, Sarah sensed the board beginning to lean in, intrigued by the potential fluidity she was proposing amidst rigid structures. This was not merely a battle of ideas. It was a moment steeped in personal evolution, a chance for her to mature right alongside the institution she aimed to steward. Yet, there loomed an unarticulated fear about her own learning curve. How would she navigate the influx of opinions and emotions generated by this new open environment? Could she shoulder the responsibility of shaping an educational ecosystem while simultaneously undergoing a personal transformation? The uneasiness buzzed in her mind, fueling her determination. She recalled the countless hours spent in coursework focused on emotional intelligence and empathy, wondering how vital those lessons would soon become as she faced the inevitable setbacks that came with real change. Such insights had formed a wellspring of strength and flexibility within her, but would they be enough to carry her through challenges lurking just below the surface? With resolve pulsing through her veins, she steeled her gaze and shifted, framing her next words as another stepping stone in both her journey and her role as a facilitator of change. Ultimately, we will all be accountable to a shared vision. The real transformation lies not just in strategies, but in our willingness to be vulnerable to grow from our failures just as much as from our successes. The stillness that followed her declaration was thick with contemplation, each board member grappling with the depth of what she had proposed. Yet, as she absorbed their expressions, uncertainty still mused within her. What lay ahead? Was she truly prepared to forge this path fraught with risks and rewards? With a firm dedication to authenticity, she had dared to envision a future where accountability bloomed as a strength rather than a threat. But she knew the road ahead would demand every ounce of courage and introspection she had harnessed thus far. Just as the air shifted, charged with potential, she felt a familiar voice whisper in her mind. Was she truly ready to confront the shadows of her aspirations? A conflict significantly more profound than any boardroom debate. She inhaled deeply, the challenges looming before her becoming clearer yet no less daunting. The moment had come for her not just to rise, but to face the hardest truths about herself and her vision. Would she continue down this path toward authenticity, or would the weight of uncertainty anchor her back into complacency? In the aftermath of the board meeting, the air in Oakwood felt charged with a new kind of electricity. The dialogue that had unfolded seemed to resonate beyond the walls of the school, touching on the essence of what it meant to be part of a community defined by its past, while reaching toward an uncertain future. Sarah emerged from that room with mixed emotions, victory intertwined with fear, as she confronted her own vulnerabilities in the wake of scrutinizing her initiative. In the weeks that followed, as word spread about the meeting, the initial pushback from community members began to evolve. Instead of mere resistance, conversations sparked throughout the town, compelling neighbors to engage in discussions about their shared history and future. Sarah found herself at the center of this awakening, riding the waves of renewed interest while grappling with her own sense of responsibility. Walking down the hallways of Oakwood High once again, Sarah reflected on her transformation since the stormy day where uncertainty gripped her with fear. She had gone from feeling stifled by the weight of her community's history to wielding that very history as a source of empowerment. Each lesson plan, each journal writing exercise she introduced, bore the mark of hard-won insight, deriving strength from the students who had rallied around her. The project she had envisioned, a curriculum teeming with emotional intelligence and resilience, started to take concrete shape. Monitoring its progress through feedback loops allowed her to reassess and adapt in real time, validating her theory that success defined by rigorous emotional and educational standards was not a project bound to numbers, but to the connections forged among students and educators alike. One Tuesday morning, Sarah stepped into her classroom, where small groups buzzed around tables, deep in conversation. They were delving into their history and identity with a scope she had never imagined, deeply analyzing their personal narratives alongside familial stories intertwined with Oakwood's legacy. Daniel emerged as a natural leader, encouraging others to narrate their histories, coaxing out hidden truths and fostering a culture of shared understanding. This was the kind of environment she longed to create. The breakthrough came when she announced that they would host a public presentation and open forum where students could share their discoveries about Oakwood, weaving personal and communal stories into a cohesive narrative tapestry. For the first time, the fear of unveiling their truths transformed into excitement. As the evening of the presentation approached, invitations had spread throughout the town, amplified by a grassroots activism that surged under her guidance. Just days before the event, residents who had once wielded criticism began to share stories. Curiosity eclipsed skepticism as neighbor spoke to neighbor, united by a common desire to explore and grow. On presentation night, the auditorium thrummed with energy. Parents, teachers, and townsfolk filled the seats. Watching her students, she could hardly believe how far they had come. They stood armed not just with facts and figures, but with bravery and conviction, ready to bridge the gap between generations through understanding. As the first student stepped forward, Sarah felt a swell of pride. They spoke openly about their families' histories, the struggles, triumphs, and the lessons learned. One by one, voices chimed in harmony, celebrating the complexities that formed the fabric of Oakwood. When Daniel took the stage, he turned to the audience with triumphant nervousness. Our past shapes our present, not to dictate our future, but to empower us to forge a better one. His words hung in the air, rippling through the crowd. When the night came to a close, it was not just a graduation from a project, but a collective transmutation of the historical narrative that had imposed a cloud of doubt across the community. Sarah watched as the audience absorbed each story, bridging generational divides through vulnerability, leaving behind a legacy that bound them together. In that moment, Sarah recognized the profound impact of her own journey. From a teacher burdened with self-doubt to a beacon of empowerment, she had not only transformed the classroom but reignited a slumbering community. The weight of responsibility she had formerly shunned had shifted. No longer a problem, it became her passion and opportunity to foster understanding among the generations. As the crowd erupted in applause, Sarah felt a rush of emotions welling within. Her grandfather's journal, once a relic of pain, evolved into a symbol of resilience and possibility. Only through facing the uncomfortable truths had she unlocked her own ability to lead, to grow, and to thrive. With a broad smile, she glanced at her students. Together, they had forged connections and shared narratives that resonated well beyond the confines of the evening. Sarah now stood firmly at the intersection of history and progress. Each student, empowered and reflective, had become a steward of their shared identity, reclaiming narratives to steer Oakwood's future with solidarity. In just a few short months, Sarah achieved far beyond her initial vision. With deep satisfaction blooming within her, she recognized the fulfillment that came from vulnerability, growth, and transformative connections. Oakwood High was no longer just a school, it was a nurturing ground for authentic, thriving identities. As she locked eyes with Daniel, who beamed down from the stage, Sarah realized that change began with the courage to confront the past and a commitment to carve a new future. Now, with more doors open than ever, she was prepared to tackle whatever came next, as she stood strong, anchored in the realized truth of her potential. The community had just begun to awaken, and Sarah Evans, teacher and now historical innovator of sorts, was at the forefront, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead in their shared journey. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It really makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share.